at one, I believe, as it calls out to every creature. Survive, thrive, reproduce. Calls out to human beings in a somewhat different way. Because we are humans, because we have developed language and thought and reflection, it calls out to us too. But it calls out something else. It calls out, I used a single word by which God calls to Adam in the Garden of Eden in the old creation story. It calls out, where are you? Each of us who comes out of this biological heritage somehow is addressed by it. The question is, you are part of this process. You are a step in the ongoing evolution of the species. What are you doing about it? How are you moving this process forward? Because the process doesn't happen outside us. It's not like there's some divine hand out there guiding it. No, it's happening inside us. This evolutionary process is happening inside us in each generation. And as we pass things on, both genetically and culturally, we are partaking of that evolutionary process. We Jews are very conscious of that, you know. If there's one mitzvah I have done that Jews care about, if there's one thing we care more about than anything else, it's the commandment of teach them to your children, the Shinantam Levanech. Jews have a tremendous sense that our lives are somehow a conduit between what our grandparents gave us and what we will pass on to our grandchildren. And even in Jewish families where the content of Judaism, the soup is nothing thicker than water, there still is that very deeply built-in urge, I've got to pass it down. And that's why there's this empty feeling when somebody realizes my grandchildren won't be Jewish. That disappointment somehow. We didn't succeed in passing it down. And the tremendous pain that comes from that in people's lives. Everybody has it, all human beings have a sense of being intergenerational. But I think we Jews, because of the combination of heritage and persecution, have that more strongly. That we are in the process. That human life is about passing something on. And of course, that which we pass on always has to be enriched by the fact that we have lived with it. If I were able to give my grandchild the exact same Judaism my grandfather brought from a shtetl in Lithuania, I'd be doing completely the wrong thing to my grandchild, I believe. Because it wouldn't be a Judaism appropriate to her age. And he came from a world, remember there were two kinds of people, Eden and Goyim. Eden spoke Yiddish and Goyim spoke Goyish, and they hated each other, and that's the way the world was. That was the size of the whole universe. We live, thank God, in a much more open and bigger universe, a frightening one sometimes, but nevertheless an infinitely richer and more open one. So that which I pass on has to be, of course, influenced by the fact that having lived with it in this particular generation and enriched by it. So we human beings, I believe, are called to know, where are you? Where are you in pushing this evolutionary process forward? That partly means biologically, but a lot of it for us, of course, means culturally, because our cultural evolution, our thinking, is part of the evolutionary process. Evolution doesn't stop when you get to human civilization. Everything about us involves our cultural forms, our technical forms, our idea of God, our idea of what human life is about, all are in process, all are in motion. So I believe that we are moving in the history of religion from tribal gods who fight with one another. My tribe's God is bigger than your tribe's God, and therefore my tribe's God killed your tribe's God, and I'm going to kill your tribe to prove it. We move from that toward monotheism. We may be moving now toward monism, toward a sense that God is about all things being one. God is about the underlying oneness of being. That monism, of course, is a philosophy that's more well-known in Eastern language than in Western language. But there are plenty of Western roots that also talk about God in that way. Not about the fellow sitting in the sky and you decided you were 14 years old, you no longer believed in, but have sought more sophisticated and different ways of understanding God as the underlying oneness of existence, or that which makes for the oneness of existence. So being called, human beings being called, where are you? And that means, where are you in advancing this process in your mind, in stretching your mind? to understanding this evolutionary process and how it's going on through you and around you as richly and fully as you can? And where are you in helping other people understand that and acting on it? Where are you in transforming the world so that this process, bigger than yourself, will continue to survive, thrive, and reproduce? Because we now know that we're in charge of much more than just who will have offspring and who won't have offspring. We're in charge of the whole enterprise of survival. That is religion as I understand it in the 21st century. We are called upon to be aware. To be as aware as we can of this underlying oneness of being, of this force that makes the whole process happen. And to be aware in a way that understands the unity and understands that there is a one behind the diversity and that it is moving somewhere and that we are part of it. We are very lazy people and very busy people, and it's hard for us to keep aware. Therefore, we human beings have created this phenomenon called religion. And all the forms are there to remind us, to keep us aware. It doesn't make very much difference, ultimately, which set of forms you use. We Jews have our forms, I love them, I'm committed to them, I'm fully engaged in my life as a Jew, but I recognize that Catholics have their forms, and Muslims have their forms, and Buddhists have their forms, and they all somehow, for me, are responses to that single question, where are you? And how well do you remember to think about where you are and what you're doing with your life? Now, of course, if the process of evolution needs us, and that's that old Jewish notion of partnership with God, now somehow retooled, if the evolutionary process needs us to carry it forward. It doesn't need just me. It needs all of us. So then the question is not only how aware are you, but what are you doing to help make other people aware? Well, you can't make them aware of the oneness of being if they're hungry. You better feed them first. You can't expect people to understand the inner voice of all creation calling out that they have no place to live. So you better give them a house first, and then you can talk to them about the oneness of being. Which is to say that I think that call, that where are you, has as much to do with moral action as it has to do with awareness itself. I don't think you need the fellow in the sky to give you a directive for moral action. I don't think you need a God other than the universe to create the imperatives that make us good people. I'll conclude with an old story. The Rabbi said, it's in Pirkei Avot, probably it's a 2nd or 3rd century text, the world was created by 10 utterances. God said 10 times, let there be. If you look at the first chapter of Genesis, God says, Yehi, Yehi, Yehi. Of course, that word Yehi, Yud, Hey, Yud, you understand, is another version of that Yud, Hey, Vav, Hey, that name that means being. Notice also, by the way, that those are all breath sounds. Yeah, ha, and what are all breath sounds. There's not a single crunchy dental or labial in them. Yes, you don't close your mouth. They're all that breath. They're all that breathing sounds. Those were vowel sounds originally. So 10 times in Genesis, God says, Yehi, let there be. The Talmud already comments on the Mishnah, wait a minute, there are only 9, I counted them. And they wind up saying the word Bereshit in the beginning is also a divine statement. So there are 10 divine statements. What does that mean? It means, demythologized, you can find everything you need to find by looking at creation itself. The divine is fully present in creation. Creation is revelation. The revelation of the existence of God doesn't come from the mountaintop. It comes from the contemplation of nature. Look at the natural world with your eyes open, and you will understand it as the divine, as brimming with the presence of that mysterious one that underlies it all and animates the whole show. But those 10 ma'amarot, those 10 utterances, are given again at Sinai in the form of 10 commandments. The 10 ma'amarot, the 10 utterances, let there be, and the 10 commandments are made parallel to one another in a host of Jewish sources going back to the Middle Ages and very much elaborated by certain Hasidic masters or so. What does that mean? It means the message is the same. But you can look at the world and say, I see divine beauty in it. And then not do anything. And then not respond. When the 10 utterances become the 10 commandments, they are repeated, but this time in the imperative. Because to be a religious human being is also to respond to that question, where are you? It's to respond. It's not just to appreciate, not just to see the beauty, but it's to say, I am here to serve. I am here to do something about this. I am here to stand up and be counted. That's how Judaism was always understood religion. There is no Judaism without mitzvot. But now using the word mitzvah in a very broad sense, a sense of commandedness, a sense of the need to respond. So our response takes the form of tradition. I learned a lot of things from my teachers. I mentioned Abraham Joshua Heschel, who was my probably greatest teacher over the years. And I learned many things from Heschel. One of them was the notion that God needs you to perform the commandments. That goes back to a great debate that took place in the Middle Ages. Maimonides said absolutely not. God is perfect, God is whole, God has no need for man. God gave us the commandments, God gave us in order to make us better people, to make us reach toward God and understand, and to act better, but not because God needs anything. The Kabbalists, especially the Ramban, who was Maimonides' critic, a century later, said no. God gave us the commandments because of what he calls Tzorech Gavoha, there's a divine need. God has ceded some of his power for the world's existence to human beings. And God therefore needs us to fulfill the commandments. Heschel's main work, God in Search of Man, tells you that he was on the Ramban side of the argument. That he was on the Kabbalah side. God needs us. But with a very important difference. Heschel grew up in the world of Hasidic masters. You know, all of his ancestors were Hasidic rabbis. And when the Hasidic rabbis taught this idea that God needs us to perform the commandments, it was all about mysterious ritual acts like blowing the shofar or shaking the lulav or going to the mikveh. God listens to every shofar sound the holy man says, and those shofar sounds go right to heaven, and that's what keeps the world going for another year. Or if you shake the lulav with enough intensity in your prayers, that somehow affects the cosmos. Heschel took that idea. He took that idea that God needs you to perform the commandments and applied it instead to the commandments between person and person. Yes, God needs you to fulfill the commandments. To feed the hungry, to stop a war, to march with Martin Luther King. That's what it means that God needs you to perform the commandments. In a theology for the 21st century in a kind of neo-Heschelian mode, and I diverge from Heschel in some ways and argue with him again and again in the course of this book, but I'm still a faithful student despite some differences in theological style. For the 21st century, that sense that God needs you is translated for me to the one that undergoes this whole process, still calls out for us human beings to participate in it. In an age when the existence of the product of that long process is very much in doubt and very much in danger. All of human life is going to be about the question, do we hear the call, and how do we respond?